Good morning and good afternoon, site members and guests. My name is Sandy Masters, your host and producer today, and welcome to the Society of Insurance Trainers and Educators Free Friday webinar. We want you, if you're a guest today, to consider ways that you can get more involved in site. And even if you're not a guest, you're a member that hasn't engaged with your fellow members, think about how you want to get involved with site, whether it's by joining site as a member of, or if you're a member, finding ways to grow more with site by getting involved. We have unlimited benefits of membership, as you can see on the screen, and we'd love for you to get connected today. Site's a great place to network with people in similar roles as yours. Professional networking has a way of becoming a great tool when you least expect it. So the relationships you sow today may yield success in the future. And I want you to visit insurancetrainers.org. If you're not a member, sign up today. And if you have any questions, certainly reach out to us. So let me tell you the story about how this came into being. As your host and presenter, it's my job also to find great people to share their expertise and talents in the virtual environments on the Free Friday webinars. And two very, very dear site member friends, former board members and longtime contributors, very talented in the learning space, agreed to put this session together on the flipped classroom. So it is my pleasure to introduce to you Paul Balbreski and Joan Quagenti, and we'll get started off with Joan. Welcome, Joan, to the virtual flipped out classroom.
Thanks so much, Sandy. It's really exciting to be here with you and Paul and all of the great folks who've joined us here today. So I want to welcome everyone. And the first thing that we're going to do is I have a trick question for everyone. So I want everyone who completed the handout that was sent to you earlier prior to the session, raise your hand if you completed your handout. Oh, look at those hands go up.
Okay.
All right. So yeah, we have some people who did not. Okay, but we
Wait a
saw a few hands
second.
go
I
up.
only I only saw like 6 hands go up. What's going on here?
I don't know. And actually, I'm seeing people who put their hand up that took them down. So I'm not really sure what they're doing. So
Oh,
okay, guys.
just real quickly, Joan, I did not mention this before we got started, but in your
Sure.
control panel, there is a handout section. If you click on the file, you can download that handout. I sent it as a pre-event handout attachment. So if you didn't get it, go ahead and just in your control panel, click on it. It'll open it up, print it off. You could use it today to capture your insights. Thanks, Joan.
Sure, no problem. So it looks like there were some people that completed the handout prior to the session today and others that did not. And later on, we'll see how that comes into play in a flipped classroom. So as we move along, we first want to talk about how we're going to use this later on. We're going to go through what a flipped classroom is, and then we're going to talk about some of the benefits and the challenges of using it. So we'll be doing that later on in the presentation. So for all of you who have a computer and who can see the screen, we have a very generic definition of a flipped classroom from Wikipedia. And as we know, there are the flipped classroom takes many forms, and this is just one of the definitions. So for those of you who are just dialing in and don't have a look at this, let me just go through it really quickly. Wikipedia defines the flipped classroom as an instructional strategy and a type of blended learning that reverses the traditional educational arrangement by delivering instructional content, which is often online, outside of the classroom. So it has the ability to move activities, including those that may have traditionally been considered homework, if you will, into the classroom. In a flipped classroom, students watch online lectures, collaborate in online discussions, or carry out research at home and engage in concepts in the classroom with the guidance of the instructor. So now we have a poll question. And how many of you love doing these? So, Sandy,
Okay, I
here we
launched the
go.
poll question on the screen. You can check all that
Excellent.
apply. What did you do? We sent you the pre-event educational assets. Don't you like how we called them? Educational assets. We're trying to get a sense of how many of you took advantage of each of those. We know how many completed the survey. That was great. And we know how many posted to LinkedIn, so we know who our winners are. And we only have 68% voted. We're up to 71. Let's see if we can get to 90% voted. All you have to do is click the buttons of the things that you did on the screen. And if you didn't do anything, I don't have a button for that. Sorry. Raise your hand right now if you did nothing. No, I'm just kidding. You on the spot. Okay, we got 80% voted. Last chance to weigh in. I'll give a countdown. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay, we got to 83%. So here's what we have. We had 85% of the people looked at the Wikipedia definition, and 65% looked at the infographic. 59% read the article. That's great because that was kind of a long article. 47% viewed the video, and then 32% either completed the survey or posted to LinkedIn. I did not have that sixth box available to me, so thanks, Joan.
Excellent. Thank you, Sandy. Thanks for doing all of that, guys. I think it's really important to show how we all participated in some of the learning assets that were sent prior to the webinar. So here we have our superstars, Magdalene Steele and Sandra Colley. You guys were the ones who actually went out to our LinkedIn site and posted a couple of comments, and thanks for your comments. I think this is really helpful because you both talk about the advantages and some of the potential disadvantages of using a flipped classroom. So our superstars will be getting a prize to be determined by
It'll
Sandy
be fabulous.
Masters.
It'll be fabulous, though, okay?
They will. They
So I'll be reaching
are
out.
fabulous.
I'll
So
be reaching out to you to get your contact information. So
terrific. And thank you for joining our LinkedIn discussion. So here we have a slide, and it shows Paul conducting a discussion. And so, Paul, I'd like to turn this over to you now and start off by asking you what a flipped classroom looks like in your organization.
Thanks, Joan, and thanks, Sandy, for having me here. Welcome, everybody. Until I was volunteered to participate in this panel, I had no idea what flipped classrooms were all about. And I think some of the poll answers kind of validate that with a lot of the people in the audience. As I researched it a little bit more and found out what the various authors were saying about flipped classrooms, I realized that I've been doing it for a lot of years. And what I found was over the years, my clients, because I do a lot of contract training, wanted more and more done with their associates and less time out of production. So I tried to experiment with ways to make the classroom time spent more on skill development, critical thinking, and coaching than a talking head. So that required me to give the content, some self-assessments, maybe some case study pre-development to the participants before they met with me. And that's been pretty successful. So what I did was I turned the old model, for me at least, of lecture and some breakout activities into content first, activities, coaching, assessment, interaction, and conversation in the live workshop. And what that did was it took a typical 3-day program as an example, and it skinnied it down to a 1-day program and allowed us to have self-paced acquisition of the knowledge component through use of technology or low tech through handouts. So that's what I did in transferring and transforming my learning model into something that was more representative of a flipped environment. Joan, now you do new underwriter hire training. How does that look like in your organization? Because you're a big company. I'm just me. So
Okay.
why don't you comment about it?
Sure. So our underwriting training group has really created a flipped classroom environment for our new hire underwriting trainers and training. And really, what the attempt was to do was to, not have them be out of the office for a long time, because what we wanted to do ultimately was to have those underwriters, come and learn and then go back to the office and be able to transfer that learning to what they need to do every day. And so what we were looking to do is create a learner-centered versus a content-centered environment. And so we wanted our learners to come prepared to talk about different issues, different coverages, different underwriting perspectives that they learned by doing some self-studies or by reading articles or by doing some things in their office, so that when they did come together as a group, we were able to take that class time and create really meaningful learning opportunities for them. So it was more of a discussion in a way that they could take the content that they learned and discuss it in a way that they would apply it on their job. And because of that, we were able to measure both their individual and group performance and see exactly how they were progressing through this program on an individual basis, and then through group activities within the course, have them work on accounts, if you will, right? Some different kinds of examples so they could apply what they've learned, and we could see how they approach something in a group environment, which is really typically something that happens back when they're on the job.
Terrific. That's great. Let's go to the next one. Now, in that handout, that colorful handout that we had earlier, that some of you looked at, if you'll refer to that, the first thing that was on that were benefits of the flipped environment. And then the next thing were the challenges and methods for overcoming the challenges. And in each of those categories, we talked about what were the benefits to the various stakeholders in the learning environment. So that was the student primarily, the organization, and also the instructor. So the first thing that we wanted to do was take a look at what are the benefits of the flipped environment. And since this is an experiment in that messy world called the flipped environment, we're going to flip it and allow audience participation, because we know that educators like to participate. We're going to give you two methods where you can contribute. Either type in the question box something that you would like to mention about the benefits to either instructors or students or the organization in using a flipped environment, or raise your hand, and if we can unmute you, we can get you to contribute verbally. So the first question is, from what you have experienced and what you have read as the pre-assessment or the pre-work, what are some positive attributes of a flipped environment? Who does it benefit? How does it benefit them? So I invite you to make your comments in the question box.
And let's go ahead and, when we could just be silent just for a moment to give people time to reflect on the benefits to the instructor, learner, and organization.
That's very difficult for me to be quiet. So I will try and exercise some discipline.
A moment of silence.
Any hands here?
We didn't ask them to raise their hand, but we can.
Yeah.
So until I get
Yeah, if you feel that you
a message that says, "Hey, did I lose audio?" then we know we've been silent too
want.
long. No, but I think one of the things we need to demonstrate too in this flipped webinar is if you're going to use online, and we'll talk about technology a little bit later, but if you're going to use this tool online, you can't just be talking and expect people to be able to be thinking and reflecting and contributing while you're talking. It just doesn't work that way. And we do have one brave soul. Helen raised her hand. I'm going to unmute her line, and I know she wants to share some comments about the benefits. So, Helen, welcome today.
Hello, can everybody hear me
Of
okay?
course we can. You sound
Yes.
great.
Good morning from sunny California.
Yay.
So one of the big benefits, and actually I'll just say a little plug, because I'm actually experiencing this for the first time. I've actually decided after 30 plus years to go back to school. So I'm doing a flipped classroom online courses with Patton University. And one of the things that I love about it is that I can consume the materials at my own pace.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So it fits with, I think also too, this is great for adult learners that have other things going on in their lives, you know. So there's work, there's home, there could be children, you know, lots of things going on, and you just have more of more opportunity to just really work at your own pace. Of course, you know, finishing everything in that, you know, in the time allotted. But it's just something, it's structured more around me as the learner and my schedule, as opposed to, you know, I'm in a classroom and I have to, you know, by Friday turn this in, turn that in. It's more open.
Yep. That's great. Helen, thank you so much. I'm going to go ahead and mute your line. And anyone else want to comment, raise your hand. Otherwise, you know what? We've got like 15 responses in here. Gail says better learning retention for the participants that require more time to consider the material. So we lose track sometimes of people learn at different paces. And if you're like all in real time and someone else needs a little bit more time to reflect, they have that opportunity. Great point, Gail. Susan says learners are more engaged, they retain more. Alex, being able to differentiate more for the learner. Casey says learner is actively involved. I like Patricia's comment, overall efficiency and maximize time to apply learning rather than taking class time to review content. I like that, Gail. Some participants feel they have a safer environment when they get to sneak peek at the material before they're actually on. Good point. Nancy says, I think trainers walk away feeling better about the class, not as frustrating if there's more interaction. That's great. That's great. Sandra says, learner self-paced. This allows students who are more advanced to speed through the material. However, for those less experienced individuals, they can watch, complete the content as many times as they need. Love it. And we've got so many comments. I'll share them out there. So any reflections based on what you're seeing in the question box, Paul?
Well, I think one of the values of the flipped environment is that you sometimes get more than you anticipate, and one of the things that the instructor needs to do is to be able to embrace that risk of having unanticipated input. And this is a perfect example. I had a couple of great benefits that I had in mind. It is more cost effective for the organization, more time effective for time out of work. It is more self-paced for the student. But look at all the rich answers that we got from the participants here. And that's an example of one of the advantages of having a flipped environment. Now, it does come at a price. It's not all a benefit. There are some challenges as well. So I'm going to, wow, look at that challenge. Man, that reminds me of my kindergarten teacher. I'm going to turn this over to Joan to talk about some of the challenges and get some input from the group.
Okay, thanks so much, Paul. So we want to do the same thing, is either have you raise your hand to, provide some input around the challenges for the instructor, the learner, or the organization, or type questions into the chat so that we can share that information with each other. I think some of the challenges here are definitely from an instructor standpoint. I think it takes a lot of time to organize and to create a strategy around the learning activities that are going to be the most effective to have for the learners in this type of environment. So it's not as easy as, somebody like this lovely woman here in this photo, being the talking head. Anyone can be the talking head, but what do people really take away from that? And so it really takes a lot of thought into the design of the learning to figure out how you're going to get this information to folks at what time, how to get them motivated to sort of, go and do that work ahead of time, and then provide feedback for you in the session. So I think there's a lot of things that are there. So learners, I think, similar to what Helen was saying, is that learners need to be much more self-directed. So you can do it at your own pace. The issue with learners sometimes is that, and I'm sure there is none of us who would ever admit to being procrastinators, who kind of think they can save it all for the last minute and then come and be prepared, because it doesn't really work that way. They really need to come prepared, and we need to find ways to motivate them to do that. So there are some things there. For the organization, I think, what I view as some of the challenges is that sometimes our organizations may not necessarily buy into the idea, and it may require additional funding to create really good quality flipped programs. So the additional time it takes to develop and deploy the kinds of learning assets that might be required in order to make this successful, there may be some, some folks who don't believe that it could work. So there's many things that I believe are challenges to this format. So I would like to hear from all of you as far as what you would see challenges for the instructor, the learner, and the organization to a flipped classroom.
So we do have, I believe it's LaCunta has raised a hand, and so I'll unmute you in just a moment. We do have some responses coming in, but please do reflect on your challenges. I really like Gail's comment. She says it's more difficult for the instructor to anticipate challenges the learner will have while they're reviewing the material and trying to figure out exactly what the expectations are. Sometimes you don't know what you don't know until it pops its ugly head up. So thank you for that. Helen says, can be a challenge if someone is a procrastinator. Yeah, that is a challenge. Some learners need a more structured environment. Do this, then do this, then do this. I definitely agree with that, Helen. Eunice says, learner not coming to class prepared. That's a big one, a big one. How can they engage and reflect and contribute if they don't come prepared? Mary says, how do you get past strict confidentiality with insurance company training material? This is a question for us. How do we get past those strict confidentiality with insurance company training material? And Mary, if you don't mind, she makes a comment. We started Discovery Learning recently, and it has been very helpful. So if you feel comfortable raising your hand, or maybe just using your comment or question box and sharing a little bit more about what is that Discovery Learning, that sounds intriguing to me. And we've got so many other great comments. I'm going to share these out in the question box. Let's address LaCunta, and then Mary, thank you. We'll listen to you next. Go ahead. Welcome. Tell me how to say your name first.
She made a comment saying that her hand was not raised.
Oh, okay, great. Let me just lower her hand, and then Mary will go ahead, and you're unmuted. Welcome, Mary.
Hi, thank you. Can you hear me?
Yeah, you're great.
Okay. So we recently started doing discovery learning, which puts it into the learner's hands with their own development. We went through a company called Teletech to redesign our curriculum. So we did go through that process, and it has been very helpful, especially from the leadership standpoint, from the representatives that we're actually putting onto the floor, that they're more well prepared, and we do a lot of simulated learning as well.
Interesting. So, what is your definition of discovery learning?
My definition is a little bit different than what we have actually put out. But basically, discovery learning is you're putting it on the learners. You're not in front of the class telling them. They're discovering it on their own with the resources available within the company.
Mm-hmm. And so how do you get the resources to them? How do you get the resources discoverable? Do you send it in an email? Do you have like dashboards for them? How does that get to them?
We have SharePoints.
Okay.
And they're able to access all of their resources. So once they're in their roles, they no longer need that support, and they're able to find the answers for themselves.
Mm-hmm. Very good. Any additional comments, Paul and Joan, for Mary before I put her on mute?
Yeah, I think that's great.
This is interesting. Gail makes a comment. She's also attending classes online, and she says a challenge for her is sometimes the instructor's directions lack clarity. They may seem perfectly clear to them, but to me, not so much. So I'm going to throw out a quick poll question for the audience. How many of you felt the instructions for this flipped out webinar were not really clear? Go ahead and raise your hand. It's not going to hurt our feelings. Just, if you felt a little bit about confused of what you were supposed to be doing. So a few people, no worries. Okay. Always look for ideas for improvement there. Yeah. Sandra says facilitators can struggle with adapting to the new flipped out format. Yeah, lots of great comments here. So I'll go ahead and share your comments out to the audience. And we're going to be saving the transcripts here too. So any resources you share will be captured, okay? So if you have any ideas like the Teletech that Mary mentioned, type them in. We're going to save the chat log.
Great. So now we're going to talk about tips for overcoming some of these challenges. So a lot of us provided some really good feedback to what the challenges were for both the instructor, the learner, as well as the organization. So what are some of the things that we think we can overcome meeting these challenges? I'd like to ask everyone for examples, and I think that one of the challenges, and I think, it kind of goes back to really getting the learners motivated in this type of environment, is to really sell the value of those pre-class assignments to make sure that that folks actually do complete them, so that they've come to the flipped classroom with a lot of thoughts about what we've asked them to read, and sort of doing the homework, if you will, before the class, so that they come prepared to actually discuss and share information that they've learned around that. So what other examples do all of you have around overcoming some of the challenges for either the instructor, learner, or organization?
And we have Sandra who raised her hand, and let's see if we can get someone else who wants to share about how they're using flipped classroom in their organization. Get kind of a queue going here. And I'll go ahead and unmute Sandra. Welcome, Sandra.
Hello, how are you?
Good, good. Glad you're here.
Thank you. So, Joan, something you said struck me, which is the whole pre-work, and I think part of overcoming some of the challenges is changing our terminology. So, for example, we no longer refer to it as pre-work because really it's part of the classroom experience. So it's teaching people that the flipped classroom is still part of their classroom experience. It's not pre-work. So we really tried to get away from some of that terminology and really trying to train the participants and their managers that even though you're not on site, this is still part of your overall classroom experience.
That's a great point. Thank you.
It's so hard to break away from that traditional mindset. I'm curious to ask you, Sandra, if you are asking the participants to do something, to read something, to prepare something in advance of coming to a live session or a virtual session, what do you call it?
So we just consider it to be part of the content for the classroom. So for example, we have a virtual environment set up, and we let the participants as well as their managers know ahead of time how much time per week will be involved prior to coming out. And then at the end of each week, we really work with our facilitators, and they kind of keep track of who is completing things on a weekly basis, and then they ensure everything is being done prior to arriving on site.
Great. That's terrific.
That is terrific. Excellent. Any other comments?
I found that in some of my classes, when I engage the supervisors or the managers of the participants in advance and talk about their role in preparing people for the learning experience, I ask them to spend a few minutes with their associate to find out whether they're actually doing that part of the learning experience in advance. And when it comes from the business unit, it carries a lot more weight than when it comes from the education department. So that's one of the things that I use to overcome that challenge.
Mm-hmm. Yep. We have
That's a really good point, Paul.
Yeah, we have a few more comments, Joan. Let's see, Maggie, making learning materials available outside of the office or on the mobile devices so learners can access anytime, anywhere, which will help in preparedness. So that's a great point. We'll be sharing some tech ideas, hopefully, as well. So get ready for that. Another challenge for the learner, scheduling and access to the instructor. They're not always available when you, the learner, need them. Thanks, Helen. Gail says, I haven't used it yet. Not sure it would work in my situation, but I do have an assignment for which I'll be using the methodology. I think asking peers to review directions before distribution would be helpful. Great point on overcoming that challenge of making sure the directions are clear on what the students have to do. Provide contact information. Yes, good point.
Great. One of the things that I can share that we've done with our new hire program is that, as Paul mentioned, is getting the local offices involved in that and really kind of claiming a stake with that, because what we want is to have each of the trainees have a mentor within their office that sort of mentors them through the whole program. So again, instead of viewing it as pre-work, it's part of the entire package of new hire training, and some of that work is done within their office and other parts of that training is done within a classroom. And the expectations for both are set up so that the student knows where they are at any given point in the program, and that it makes sense for them to see that, yes, you are expected to do some of this, during working hours. And, when we get together as a classroom is where we're going to take all of that great information that you learned and now share it with each other, similar to what we're doing here, and getting some great ideas and perspectives on what it is that we're looking to do. So it is a really good opportunity to be able to involve other people to properly facilitate a flipped classroom. It really is.
Cool.
We had about 51% of the people who answered the survey said that they had heard of flipped classroom, and 49% said they had not heard of flipped classroom before our webinar invite. And then 66% of those who answered no to they've never used the flipped classroom, but 33% said they have who answered that survey. So I know some of you are on the phone who have used flipped organization and we haven't heard from you yet. Feel free to raise your hand so that we can hear how you use flipped classroom.
It's interesting. I'm sure that some of the people who said they had not heard of the terminology flipped classroom or flipped learning environment, when they started reading more about it and learning more about it, found out, like I did, that they actually had been flipping in the past. So perhaps some of that percentage had to do with people who inadvertently had been using the methodology just through their own common sense. It goes back to that traditional mode of classroom where we looked at that very stern-faced primary school teacher who was giving the evil eye to the students. We think of that traditional mode as being very one-directional, from the instructor to the student, transferring what's in their mind to the minds of the learner. And in this transformation using a flipped environment, we're making it much more a conversation rather than a monologue. It is an interaction between the instructor and among the participants. So there is more accountability for the learning put on the students. And that may be something that some of them need some preparation about. So when we use the flipped classroom in my organization, I've got to sell the people who are coming to the class on what their roles and responsibilities are. And I do that through some pre-communication about why they're going to the learning, what they can hope to get out of it, what the total learning environment, to use Sandra Coley's example, is comprised of, what that landscape will look like, so that they can anticipate a different dimension than what they possibly had been experienced in the past in professional education. And I also try to use communication. It could be an email, it could be a conference call with the managers of those people who are going through the training, so that they can understand what their people will be going through, how they can ensure a more successful outcome by preparing them, by reinforcing it afterwards, by clearing the deck so that during that time they're out of work, they're not penalized for going to training, and there's some coverage so that they're not faced with a whole lot of things in their inbox. But I'd like to hear from the group, if we can, using your question capability, if there's anything that you've used in the past that will help your instructors make this change, to help your students make this change, and to help your organization embrace the change in how this is going to occur. So I'll be quiet. I'll try and contain myself for a couple of minutes and listen to what you have to say.
And feel free to raise your hand if you'd like to share via open mic as well. Do I need to throw a carrot out there? How about another fabulous prize for someone who wants to share an open mic? Raise your hand. Yay, Gail! You're so sweet. How are you today, Gail?
I am all kinds of awesome.
All right, I love it.
And I don't even need a prize. You know, I'm just glad to be able to talk because I'm all alone and I'm just sitting here listening. I just wanted to say, and I typed it in, but results speak, and every corporation is a profit-seeking animal. So if companies understand, if somebody shows them numbers, they need metrics.
Mm-hmm.
Show us how this is better, then they'll be on board.
Mm-hmm. I know as I was looking at some of the, yeah, I know as I was looking at some of the research, because they started doing this in the K through 12, they actually have a study that they did on a school district back east, I think in Michigan, and it totally transformed. They totally flipped the entire school. Every teacher, every class, every subject, and showed the performance of the students, as far as grades and everything. So, but yeah, in the corporate world, we need to find those studies that show how the flipped classroom is having more of an impact on results.
I bet those parents in the Michigan classrooms were learning more too, because a lot of that lands on them, right?
Mm-hmm.
Sure. I think the metrics piece has always been a challenge for the learning and development area, trying to point to some outcomes and relate that to business issues. I mean, the ones that come out most readily is the impact of using a flipped environment on budget, and that could be both positive and negative. And we'll get to that in a second when we get to technology. But the other thing is time out of production, which is kind of something that is a little fuzzier, a little vaguer, but it's certainly something that is meaningful for the people in the business units. When you say that we're going to change product knowledge training from 2 days to 3/4 of 1 day, that makes a big impact on people. And it makes them sit up and wonder, how are you doing this? How are you going to accomplish the same technically prepared individual in that much less time? I mean, they're going to be happy about it, but they're going to be curious as well. So it may stimulate some conversation with them. Any other thoughts from the group?
So, Sandra asks, what metrics do you use for flipped classroom? And I'm thinking, would you even need to use different metrics if you're trying to get to that level 4 evaluation, which is outcomes and performance, right? But a lot of companies aren't even really doing that level of evaluation.
I think you're right about that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Concerned about budget and how much time, how many days are spent in training as opposed to days spent actually doing work.
Mm-hmm.
Gail? It's really a process of free education of the organization.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Gail makes a comment, it's more difficult when your participants are agents and brokers and you don't have control of the bodies. I like that. Yeah.
And again, I think it just kind of goes to really selling the point of, why they need to participate in the way we're asking them to participate and why it's important. So, I mean, I sort of look at this back to, getting your CPCU. Companies support people getting their CPCU, but typically underwriters aren't given time during the day to go sit in a corner and read for a couple of hours because they've got work to do. So to me, it's sort of the same thing. It's, it's really kind of goes towards showing the learner what you think the intended result of getting immersed in this training is going to be. What it's going to do for them, what it's going to do to meet their business goals, and how it's going to move the organization forward.
Right. Sandy, can we flip to the next one? I'm looking at my at the time and want to be conscious of everyone's participation here. One of the things that we talked about next was use of technology. And I wanted to make a couple of comments about how I use technology and then open it up to the group. Using, and we look at the graphics there, it can be very, very high tech, and it could be a little bit less tech with the individual using an iPhone, making a little video that can be used. The use of technology, it can complement your learning management system. It can be centered primarily on capturing content that you want people to absorb in advance, and that can be done by use of videos. It can be used in a very low-tech environment, which is what I use typically, and that's just send out a bunch of readings by email. So there's a wide spectrum of the use of technology, from the simple to the more complex. And of course, the more complex you get, the easier the access is, but the trade-off may be on the effect on your budget. So any comments from the group about the use of technology that you have had, and what success or what cautionaries that you may have in the use of technology?
So Sandra is sharing, we utilize Virtual Classroom within our LMS to house all the flipped classroom content. Our content varies from podcasts, discussion boards, videos, e-learning, etc. Our LMS can be accessed via the mobile device. That's like getting to the more advanced side of technology. That's terrific. I think if you're doing webinars, just recording webinars is a good source. If you got a good recording of a presentation and using that to help provide content up front.
And we're talking a lot about creating your own content.
Mm-hmm.
And when you're talking about products or you're talking about company-specific issues, that may be appropriate. But those of you who are involved in training business skills or soft skill training, you may find that there's already produced content that you can access through providing links to websites or links to videos that you have screened. YouTube is a tremendous resource that may be available for business skills. Any others before we go on to the next slide?
And if anyone would like to share, I'll leave it open, so if you want to raise your hand, I'll put the carrot out there too. Another fabulous site gift. Gail's our first, our third, I should say.
We're really cleaning out the site closet, aren't we? With the gift.
Craig is asking a question, making a comment. When reading assignment is made, how do you know the reading level of the audiences? Very few companies measure reading skills. Does this make video more effective? Is the video more animated? Does this enhance the learning experience? Certainly, I know that I don't really want to watch a talking head, right? I want to watch a video like I watch, television. It's got action and movement and all of that. So that's really challenging. Good questions.
That is a great question. What I can share really quickly is I worked in a sales organization at one point that we needed to get some customer service skills out to the folks who dealt with people on the phone. And so because we had an in-house videographer, we were able to tap into that person and create these really outlandish videos of, and we actually, what we did is we asked the managers to do it. So we put managers in positions where they were, were on the phone with, with a customer, for example, and doing all of the wrong things. And there were just really funny things going on, people interrupting them, and, the person putting the customer on hold because they were talking to their buddy about where they were going for happy hour that night, and getting the person back from hold, and, just really outlandish things. And they were entertaining. They proved a point, and then what we asked everyone to do after they viewed the video was to then reenact the situation in the way that they should as a professional employee who is dealing with customers on the phone. And it was really, really effective. So that's just one thought. It depends, again, on the access that you have to different things and what your company is willing to do.
That's great. That's really great. I wanted to use an example of both a before and after, and use the site Train the Trainer to be that example. I'm going to ask Joan to comment on the former because she was very involved in some of the redesign of the former Train the Trainer program and was an instructor in the Train the Trainer program. What did it look like?
So that's a really that's a great question, Paul. And I can say that the initial site Train the Trainer, as it shows on the slide here, it was definitely all live. There were some pre-work assignments that people needed to do. It went on for 4.5 days, and it basically was lecture and some activity in order to take the information presented in the lecture and really sort of actionalize it for the students. I think that it was well received. However, it was 4.5 days, so many companies wouldn't commit to having their folks out that long. The pre-work assignments were exactly that. They were kind of pre-work, so people did the work, but then we didn't ask them, when they got to class, what they thought about it, how it resonated with them. It definitely was more of a lecture. So I think while the program was good, what we've done now is better.
Well,
so can you tell us a little bit more?
Different.
Yes.
It's certainly different. We increasingly we were getting feedback from people saying it's a great program. It gives us everything about adult learning theory, but our companies won't let us take a week away from work for professional development. So we partnered with the institutes and we re-engineered and reimagined the program to take all of the knowledge components and put it in the institute's LMS system so that it would be accessible, it would be self-paced so people could refer back to it, and so that the facilitators, the instructors, could monitor how many people at what pace they were going through the assignments. So we were able to see, as some of the participants said before, just what progress people were making and where the problem areas were through some of the assessment tests. And that allowed us to shift the focus from the old lecture mentality to something that was much more interactive in a reduced amount of time, and people were we were seeing that the enrollments were picking up dramatically because people were selling the value of the program to their companies and saying, we only have to be out for 2 days. And the companies really, really liked that. So that was an example of how we transformed the learning environment and used the flipped way of doing it. So Joan, you want to do that sneaky thing again?
Oh, sure, absolutely. So we had a number of learning objectives that we had communicated to you prior to the session, and that's to experience the flipped classroom model, understand the benefits of a flipped classroom model, recognize what some of the challenges are, and then talk about the use of technology. So what I'd like to be able to do is ask for your input and by a show of hands ask you if you think that we met some of these learning objectives. One of the things that I wanted to stress around this is that, you know, learning objectives are truly meant for those who are designing learning. They're really not meant for the learners. So one of the ways that, you know, in a learning environment, this is not really the way that we can really get people involved. But for example, in the Train the Trainer session, what we do up front is ask people what they want to get out of the session, and then a day in, we take a measurement and see where we are. And by the end of the sessions, we want to make sure that everyone has gotten something out of the session that has helped them realize how they can then take the information and rock their world with it, right? So I just want to ask you, by a raise of hands, you know, how many people thought that we covered enough and that we turned the tables on you, okay, by asking you that trick question at the beginning of how many people did complete the page ahead of time, because again, it's focused more on the learner. So it's not about us talking, it's really the learner taking ownership of that participation and bringing that information to the class.
So raise your hand if you know a little more about flipping out now than before our time together today.
Quite a few hands there, so that's good.
Yeah. Okay, we're up to 63%, but we thank you. And Joan, Paul, thank you so much for your time today and lending your talents and expertise. And thank you to our participants. And I'll be contacting our 3 superstar participants for engaging today and send you an exotic, exciting gift. I don't know what it's going to be yet, but at this time, I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording.